Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to the virtual Sunday Feast lecture at ISKCON Brooklyn, New York City. On behalf of ISKCON New York City, I once again welcome you all to this virtual Sunday Feast lecture. So today we are very fortunate to have the association of our GBC, His Holiness Devāmṛta Swāmī Maharaj, who is joining from New Zealand. And Maharaj would be giving a feast lecture on the topic Friends and Enemies are Basic Necessity of Life. So we'll wait for Maharaj to join. And once he joins, I request him to start the lecture. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my most humble obeisances. Um, so Maharaj has joined, and I would request Maharaj to start the lecture. So I think Maharaj, if you so desire, we can have a short kirtan till other participants join in, and then you can give your lecture. And if you wish, we can have some questions at the end. Thank you, Maharaj, for your association. Hare Krishna.
You're going to lead the kirtan?
No, Maharaj, I would love you too.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Giridharidhari Suranandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Giridharidhari Suranandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda Radhe, Jaya Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda Radhe, Jaya Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda Radhe. Go Premanande, Hari Hari Bo. So I'm mostly addressing the Shishi Radha Govinda community of New York, but of course, I see persons from various parts of the universe who have gathered. I see Surapal and Krishna Mai. Is that Anna from the Southwest, at least for the moment? So nice to see you. And ISKCON New York City. And I see my illustrious godbrother, Devāmṛta Svāmī Maharaj. How dare I have the audacity to speak in his presence? Hare Krishna. Om Jnana-Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jnana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The topic for tonight is meant to be ironic. I think you've figured out. Friends and enemies, a basic material necessity Question mark. In other words, the way life is lived in this world, because we have a material body and we're operating in the material atmosphere, because of all that, friends and enemies are a natural outcome. This will be our theme for today. In other words, material existence is not such that the existence of friends and enemies is added into the mix, into the recipe. No, it's part and parcel of having a material body in the material world. So this will be a recurrent theme in our discussion. And we're going to choose a flagrant example for the most part to focus on. The history of Prahlad Maharaj. But I think we're going to go at it from an angle that perhaps you haven't considered. We're going to stress the friends and enemies aspect. Not so much at all Lord Nrsingadev's appearing to Prahlad. No, we're going to focus on how Prahlad's associates, especially his father, were totally absorbed in friends and enemies. And Prahlad was totally not into it because there was a difference in the consciousness. On the one side, there was insistence about friends and enemies. On the other side, there was no such distinction. The Bhagavatam deals a lot. Maybe you haven't noted. It deals a lot with this whole friends and enemies thing. You know from Bhagavad Gita, Krishna Surdam Sarva Bhutanam. He's the friend of all living entities. But those who are materially motivated have doubts about Krishna. In fact, those doubts can be severe. And even those who are pious, sometimes without blaming Krishna directly for doing something that appears to them as playing the friends and enemies game, still they analyze situations in that way. This is what Devāmṛta did in the 6th canto. She's a very pious person, exalted Deva, but she was very upset that her 2 sons, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, both were killed. Now, she knew good and well that these sons were demoniac, super demoniac, but at the same time, a mother's affection has no limit. And she blamed Indra. She said, Kadanu Bhaktri Hantaram Indriyaramam Ulbanam Aklina Hridayam Papam Gatayitva Shaye Sukham. This Indra, he's very fond of sense gratification. And by his utilizing Lord Vishnu, she didn't blame Lord Vishnu directly. She didn't insult Lord Vishnu directly, but it's all Indra, and somehow or other he, via Vishnu, caused the death of my 2 sons. Indra is very attached to sense gratification. He's cruel-hearted and he's sinful. She totally overlooks what she's done. That's the nature of the friends and enemies game. You play the blame game and you totally overlook any possible wrongdoing that we've done, any negative influence that we could have injected into the situation. And we become angry at the designated enemy. And what does she say? And we can really relate to this in our honest moments. Gatayitva sheye sukham. When Indra is killed, then I will rest with a pacified mind. Can you remember sometimes feeling like that? Someone blocked your way, interfered with your life, cheated you, or misused you, or whatever. And you just, if that person would just disappear from this world, I'll be so happy and peaceful. Right? We all have had situations like that because that's life in the material world. A German philosopher, Nietzsche, had the material consciousness really down expertly. Of course, he thought this is tattva, this is the truth, this is the way you should be. He said, happiness is when your power is expanding and when obstacles are overcome. That's happiness. Some say that this notion, this philosophical notion by this eminent philosopher led to 2 world wars. Germany took it really seriously. So just think about that in terms of our own psychology. We're happy. We feel fulfilled when our power is expanding. Yes. My influence is increasing. And any obstacle in our way is overcome. Can you remember that feeling of, yes, this is all great. This is the way life should be. So DT personifies so nicely or encapsulates so nicely this whole psychology. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out the same point. Sukham Shaye means I sleep peacefully. Isn't it great to sleep peacefully knowing your enemies are vanquished, your obstacles are overcome, and your power is expanding? Isn't that great? To sleep peacefully. Oh, it's such a luxury for so many. The atmosphere is saturated with anxiety, especially these days. People are on edge in terms of politics, economics, the environment, the pandemic. And the blame game is omnipresent. Who shall I blame because I'm not getting what I want? Which people shall I blame? Which nation shall I blame? Is this syndrome making people more peaceful? Are they resting, sleeping more peacefully with such antagonistic attitudes? No, but the illusory energy makes it seem that this will be the result. You will rest peacefully. This is what Diti thought. When Indra is killed, when that cruel, sinful, hard-hearted, put whatever curse word you want in the blank, when he's dead, I will finally rest with a peaceful mind. So much of material religiosity has to do with having your enemies killed. The Lord will vanquish my enemies. And then the other people are thinking, the Lord will vanquish you. You're my enemy. This is material religiosity. So it's very important that we understand where this psychology is coming from and how pervasive it is. Sometimes it affects our devotees. We look upon other devotees as getting in the way of what we want to do for Krishna, or thinking in a different way how to achieve particular devotional goals. Sometimes we can get very agitated. How can these devotees think like this? Can you believe that? They must not be chanting their rounds. They must not be following the regular principles. How can they be thinking like this? Unbelievable. And then the other devotees that we're having this attitude about may have the same attitude about us. Oh, how can that person have that kind of idea, that kind of understanding? Sometimes our devotees are affected by the predominant material atmosphere. And today, the atmosphere is surcharged with strife, polarization, agitation, aggression. So our devotees have to be careful not to be influenced by this. We have to be on guard in an extra way. You have to know what the weather is and be prepared. If there's going to be a thunderstorm or even a hurricane, you prepare. So we should know the signs of the times, that throughout the whole world, minds are more disturbed than ever. So it's good for us to study this friends and enemies hallucination, beginning with Devāmṛta. And she talks it really good. She says, the greatest rulers of the material world, what happens when they're dead? Their body turns into krimi vid bhasma, worms, stool, or ashes. So why would they kill others, knowing what their destination is in terms of the end of this body? How can they truly be intelligent if they're going to give pain to others? Of course, she's neglecting completely what her sons did to everyone else. But this is the nature of bodyism. What my body needs and what my body does is fine. And if your body dares to interfere with what my body wants and what my body needs, then we have a massive world problem. So Devāmṛta is speaking very eloquently. If one enviously kills others for the protection of such a body that's destined for worms, stool, or ashes, does he actually know the true interest of life? Certainly, he does not. In other words, certainly Indra does not. And certainly Indra goes to hell. This is Devāmṛta's polite way of telling Indra to go to hell. She'll be so happy when he's dead, and she'll be even happier when after death he goes to hell. And again, what about those two ferocious sons she had? Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. Still, in her motherly rage, she doesn't blame directly Vishnu. She kind of just alludes to Vishnu's somehow they're getting caught up in all this, but the real fault is Indra. So this is, as the acharyas explain, tamasic bhakti. Bhakti affected by the mode of ignorance. She is going to prevail upon her husband to teach her how to do rituals that will allow her to have a son that will kill Indra. Her husband is a great sadhu, and so she wants him to equip her through sadhana practices to equip her with the ability to have a son that can kill Indra. This is not pure devotional service in any way, shape, or form. But she is so intent on this. let's hear a little bit more about her anger. She's raging. She's thinking, Indra considers his body eternal, and thus he has become unrestrained. I therefore wish to have a son who can relieve Indra of his madness. In other words, who can terminate him. Let me adopt some means to help me in this. So it's not the focus of this class to go into how she manipulated her husband. That's not the point. We're focusing on the friends and enemies thing, that syndrome, which motivated her to attract her husband's mind. Now keeping that in mind, let's move from the 6th canto to the 7th canto, because you're going to see even more intensely the friends and enemies syndrome dominate the atmosphere. So let's not get caught up in our traditional focus in terms of Prahlāda and Hiranyakashipu. Instead, let's concentrate on the friends and enemies issue. You see, first, Prahlāda is not the enemy. What happens at first? The whole enemy focus begins with whoever taught Prahlāda about bhakti. They are the first to receive Hiranyakashipu's designation, the enemy. And then you're going to see the focus in terms of the friends and enemies switch to Prahlāda's teachers, Sanda and Amharka. Hiranyakashipu is going to be so terroristic towards these teachers whom he's hired, more or less hired, for instructing Prahlāda. In other words, Hiranyakashipu's got to find the target, the legitimate, specific target for his wrath. Who is the enemy that's causing all this? He excuses Prahlāda at first. He jumps on Sanda and Amharka, the teachers of Prahlāda, and then finally he realizes it's my own son. Please note that this history of friends and enemies in the case of Hiranyakashipu and Prahlāda is so intriguing that several times Yudhisthira Maharaj asks Narada Muni about it. This comes up 3 times in the 7th canto. How is this possible that a father is so inimical toward his own son? How can that be? When has this ever happened? Especially because this son is so saintly with such glorious characteristics. So the concession is made. All right, parents sometimes chastise their children, but that's all for the well-being of the child. But they don't try to kill the child. I was talking to some children of devotees yesterday at our Sunday morning program. We're a bit ahead of you in New Zealand, so today is Monday, 12:30 p.m. So these 4 and 5-year-old kids were attending Bhagavatam class. And And we were talking about Lord Kapilada's presenting of how life in the womb is. Third canto, we are studying those verses. So some or other, the topic of children came up. And I asked the kids, do you guys remember being in the womb of your mother? Do you remember being born? Of course they didn't. Even though it was just a few years ago, they have not the slightest memory of such a traumatic experience. And some other, we got on the subject of raising children very briefly. And so I said to the kids, remember they're 4 or 5 years old, I said, aren't you lucky you took birth in a country where it's illegal for your parents to spank you? They all laughed. Yes, in New Zealand, if a parent spanks a child, that's against the law. So I told the kids, you guys are lucky. You don't know how good you have it. So this is the point between Narada Muni and Yudhisthira Maharaj. Okay, parents do correct their children, but it's out of love. They don't try to kill their child. Never before have we heard such a thing. So now Yudhisthira Maharaj is asking Narada, please, can you elaborate on this? This is astonishing. In this way, the history unfolds. So, you know that Sandanamarka actually, as Brahmanas sort of, shouldn't have been in the employ of Hiranyakashipu. But their father, Shukracharya, wanted the best material benefits for his sons. And so therefore, Shukracharya put his sons at the control of Hiranyakashipu. What parents will do when they want their children to succeed. They tried to educate Prahlad their way, and they did a good job of it in terms of the material standards. That means teaching Prahlad about politics. This is the time in the USA, especially when everyone is absorbed in politics. Which group are you with? Which party are you with? Who is the enemy group? Who is the good group? So the Bhagavatam points out, Prahlad certainly heard and recited the topics of politics and economics taught by the teachers. But he understood that political philosophy involves considering someone a friend and someone else an enemy, and thus he did not like it. So Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that this friends and enemies syndrome is not only on a personal, neighborhood level or local level, it's international. And of course, it's even interplanetary. Who are the enemy groups? Who are the favorable groups? Who is allied with us? Who is allied with our enemy? So many millions of people in this world have died because of friends and enemies alliances. If you study the history of World War I, it is ridiculous. Because of alliances between a major nation and one tiny nation, so much violence follows. World War I was known as the war to end all time tiny countries that you don't even, you don't know, you can't remember their name anymore. You don't even know that they existed. They were causing such a major ruckus because they were allied with bigger nations, and everyone has to honor their alliances. Then the amazing thing is that countries that fought against each other in World War I, some of them became allies in World War II. And then you have countries that were violently against each other in World War II, then after the war's over, become allies. This is madness, and millions of people die because of this. Just like in World War II. Who died? Was it the soldiers? No, out of the 60 million persons killed in World War II, only 15 million were the military personnel. 45 million were civilians. So this friends and enemies stuff is deadly because it's not simply on an individual level. I've got my personal friends and enemies, you've got yours. No, the same syndrome covers the whole world and causes massive destruction. So we really need to take what Prahlad Maharaj is saying and thinking very seriously. Just like most of you are in the USA, I always like to point out some of you, not all, but some of you may be wondering, where's the health care that should be there for everyone? If I'm sick, I can just walk into any hospital in New Zealand and they want to make sure I'm a citizen. And then they say, okay, whatever, what do you need? You get the same medical care as a wealthy person. But the USA, land of the free, home of the brave, spends more on its military than the next 7 nations combined. And those next 7 include China and Russia. So whatever your political bent, and we're not talking about that, what we are talking about is the money is going somewhere. Think about that. If it's not going to public health, it's going somewhere. All because of friends and enemies. The same kind of consciousness that Hiranyakashipu specializes in. Sometimes you hear people say about nuclear weapons, our nation needs nuclear weapons in order to protect our freedoms. Hey, your freedoms are such that you can't even stay healthy. Your freedoms are such that you're manipulated in a consumer society. And so now, you may not know it, but there is a 30-year plan to upgrade the nuclear arsenal, which started out costing $1 trillion. You can't even understand how much is $1 trillion. Now it's up to $1.5 trillion and expected to hit the $2 trillion mark. Simply to do something so essential as renovating the nuclear arsenal in order to protect our freedoms. Meanwhile, we are getting sick, we are dying, we are getting old, and we are taking birth again. This is atrocious. And again, it's an outcome of the whole friends and enemies illusion. So I like, especially, of course, how Srila Prabhupada explains He says in the purport, politics involves accepting one group of men as enemies and another group as friends. Everything in politics is based on this philosophy, and the entire world, especially at the present, is engrossed in it. The public is concerned with friendly countries and friendly groups, or enemy countries and enemy groups. But as stated in Bhagavad Gita, a learned person does not make distinctions between enemies and friends. Devotees especially do not create friends and enemies. Something we all need to remember. Because sometimes in the course of our devotional service, it seems like another devotee is blocking our path, blocking our service, just doesn't understand, or just doesn't like us. And we make ourselves sick over this. And although we don't want such a mentality to consume us, what happens? Somehow or other, you start thinking, if that other devotee would somehow or other disappear from the world, things would be much better. And then we catch ourselves, ooh, no, can't think that way. This is demoniac. There's something about Hare Krishnas, don't mind my saying. There's something about Hare Krishnas that we like to get on the high horse and ride, as they say in the USA. We like to really cloak ourselves. I have this chutter on. We like to wrap ourselves in moral superiority in terms of what is that devotee doing? He or she doesn't have any idea. And I have the right idea. So somehow or other, we have to create unity and diversity. That is the great challenge for ISKCON's leaders. And in order to achieve that goal, we've got to wrestle with this friends and enemies syndrome. So I think at this point, because so many of you know the Prahlad Hiranyakashipu history, I want to jump to the part of the seventh canto where you can clearly get the knowledge that the friends and enemies vision is because of having a material body. And the friend and enemy or partiality judgment leveled at the Supreme Personality of Godhead is because of thinking he has a material body. At the very beginning of the seventh canto, this issue is threshed very wonderfully. Pritchett Maharaj asks Shukadeva Goswami, Sama Priya Suhid Brahman Bhutanam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is equal, impartial, Sama. And he's dear to all living entities. All living entities are dear to him. And he's the friend of all living entities. So why does it seem like he favors the demigods? Because in the sixth canto, you heard about how it seemed that Vishnu backed Indra, or as deities thinking, became a mechanism for Indra to wipe out Diti's sons. So Pritchett Maharaj wants to raise this question. And he even says, I've got some doubts. But the doubts weren't his. He's speaking on behalf of persons who would have such confusion. And what is Shukadeva Goswami's response? Sadhu Prashna Maharaja Haresh Charitam Adbhutam. Your question is excellent. It's so relevant. O King. And it's going to lead to a discussion of Krishna's glories. That first chapter of the 7th canto is very important because in the midst of the death of Indra's enemies, and the death of Hiranyakashipu, and the lamenting by Diti about the death of Hiranyaksha, in the midst of all that, the Supreme Lord's impartiality is asserted. We find out that it's only because of our material vision that we see partiality in the Supreme Lord. Partiality, friends and enemies, is part of having a material body. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead has no material body. But because we have a material body, we impose aropita, the Sanskrit term. We impose our material conceptions, which we're toting around because we have a material body. We impose those on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why is God doing this to me? When actually, the three modes of nature are providing the suitable influences to those who live under those influences. So Pritchett Maharaj wants to make it clear that it is so, that the Supreme Lord is impartial, beloved to all and by all, and is the friend of everyone. Because you would ordinarily think, wait a minute, if he's impartial, sama, then why does he seem to favor the demigods? And if he is priya, he's dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him, why aren't the demons dear to him? And if he's the friend, Surit, then shouldn't the demons also be his friends? These are the issues that Pritchett Maharaj is raising. The answer Shukadeva Goswami gives focuses mostly on pointing out that you raise these doubts because you don't understand Krishna's body. In other words, he doesn't just jump into a point-for-point refutation of why Krishna did this to this demon or that to that demon. It's amazing. Shukadeva Goswami first uses the whole doubt, uses the whole issue of the Lord's impartiality to point out something about the Lord's body. Now think about that. And also to point out something about our body and the vision that comes along with our material body. We're hallucinating. We're seeing something that doesn't exist. We're seeing partiality in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that implies we think he has a material body. I hope.
Class चल रही है live. Sunday फिर.
उनका भी संडे बनी है.
Vedic roots, please do something about your microphone.
Maharaj,
Because we have a
please.
material body, we see partiality in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This puts everything back on our shoulders and clears the way for us to understand Krishna's body, which is non-different from himself, of course. Now we can proceed to the transferal of the enemy designation, the designated enemy, from whoever snuck in to teach Prahlad at the Asura Kula to the teachers and then to Prahlad himself. So you know, Hiranyakashipu, the first time sat Prahlad on his lap and asked, what's the best thing you've learned in school? And you know the answer. Tatsaru manyeya suya bharya dehinam sada samadvigya dhyama sagraha. Oh, Father, the best thing I've learned in school is that anyone who identifies with the body must be in anxiety. They've taken shelter of a well which has no water. Dad, I think you ought to give up this scene, head for the forest, particularly Dad. I think you should go to Vrindavan. What was Hiranyakashipu's response? We want to focus once again on the friends and enemies syndrome. He laughed. He didn't take it seriously. He immediately thought, this child's intelligence has been influenced by the enemy. The child is not the enemy, but somehow or other, see, Hiranyakashipu is thinking strategically. Somehow or other, my boy has encountered Vaishnavas and they have spoiled his intelligence. So he laughed. The enemy is whoever snuck in. They've ruined or they've affected my boy's intelligence. He didn't take it seriously. So he gave the teachers, Sandanamarka, strict instructions to educate this boy more thoroughly. And they took that very seriously. While trying to teach Prahlad, they wanted to uncover the identity of the Vaishnavas who had polluted Prahlad's intelligence. And so they treated Prahlad very nicely. Prahlad, you're such a nice boy. We understand that others have been talking to you. Prahlad, can you kindly just give us the names? Because they're thinking, we'll get promoted if we get the information. This reminds me of my ferocious days in the Soviet bloc, looking at Surapal. He was there with me in the early 80s. Prominent technique by the secret police, the Soviet secret police. A prominent technique was to convince everyone that we know everything, so you might as well tell us. Oh, again and again, I would get into so much trouble because of this trick. The secret police would call someone in, call a devotee in, and the devotee would already be psyched out by the usual conceptions that they just know everything. So you might as well just tell them, because what's the point in causing suffering for yourself and others when they already know it? So you just tell them. So again and again, this happened. And of course, after you tell them, then they know. So this is what Sandanamarka are. They're playing the game with Prahlad. They even, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, they would offer Prahlad sweets. Come on, have a sweet. Spill the beans. Tell us what's going on. And also they were hoping that they would just hit the nail right on the head. We'll treat Prahlad sweetly, so he'll give us the information, and also somehow or other at the same time will impart to Prahlad the need for him to stay away from those persons, whoever they are, stay away from them if he wants to avoid trouble. So they wanted to be nice and intimidating at the same time. They were materially clever brahmanas. Their hope was promotion. We get the information. We find out the names of those who polluted Prahlad's intelligence. We have these perpetrators. It's like what I know what New York City police call someone who they think has committed a crime. I know, Mike, because I have so many relatives who are in the police. My father was a career man in New York City Police Department, so they call them perps. You don't say perpetrator. That's it's too much of a big word to say. So you say the perps. So Son of the Market wanted to find out the perps, the perpetrators, and turn them into Hiranyakashipu to be killed. And then Son of the Market make career advancement. Haribo, isn't that what it's all about? Advancing your career, no matter what, no matter how many persons you trample and cause pain to, your career has to advance. So they tried again to re-educate Prahlad. And again, you know that scene. Number 2, Prahlad is on the lap of his father. And don't forget the affection Hiranyakashipu is showing. He's smelling Prahlad's head. He's bathing the head with tears. Prahlad. He's still a demon, though. And he asked Prahlad the same question. And you know the answer Prahlad gave. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. That's the 9 processes of devotional service. That's the best thing I've learned. This time, Hiranyakashipu, his rage went through the ceiling. He threw Prahlad off his lap. Such child abuse. But he went after Sandanamarka. Did you please remember that? He still hadn't fingered Prahlad as the ultimate enemy. He started talking to Sandanamarka. You are the enemy in disguise. You're masquerading as my supporters. You're masquerading as being favorable to me, but you actually are the enemy. You can just imagine what Sandanamarka were thinking. They had to really set things straight very quickly. So they presented, it's not us, it's not us, it's not us, it's your boy, it's your boy, it's your boy. So finally, Hiranyakashipu added 1 + 1 = 2 and accepted that his son was the enemy. And that's when he ordered Prahlad to be killed. So my point in explaining all this is that you can see the spotlight of enemy designation shifting. It's always an operation. First, it's the demigods, it's Vishnu. Then it's those who snuck in, the Vaishnavas who snuck into the school to poison Prahlad. And then it's Sandanamarka. You would think Hiranyakashipu trusted them so much, but he could only conclude at first, you're cheating me. You're filling my boy's head with this nonsense, and you're supposed to be loyal to me. Then when they said, well, no, we're innocent, we're clean, then and only then did Hiranyakashipu put the entire focus on Prahlad. I've got to get rid of Prahlad, my own son, kill him. So, of course, that's, we would say, an extreme case. On the one hand, the sadhu qualities of Prahlad, how humble and sweet and respectful. And on the other hand, the ferocity of Hiranyakashipu. But let's not hide from our own friends and enemies' complexity. How we do it. There's something I've noticed through introspection and reading Srimad Bhagavatam. There's something that comes along with the material body that causes us to designate some persons as friends and some persons as enemies. It's part of the material body, the material mind, and we really have to be on guard about that. Some of us are carrying traumas from our early in life. Some of us have been mistreated in material society. Some of us have been mistreated in the devotee society. And so we harbor these things, and sometimes we're unconscious about it, but our vision's affected. It takes a concerted effort to beg Krishna, please transform my vision. I don't want to see devotees in terms of friends and enemies. It takes supernatural power, because that friends and enemies imposition, that arupita, is part of having a material body and a material mind. So we have to know what we're up against. Otherwise, we'll just do it. We'll just continue with that friends and enemies trip on autopilot. Of course, if we're chanting Hare Krishna and undergoing the bhakti sadhana, we're going to get purified, but let's speed it up. And to speed it up, we need knowledge of what the real enemy is. And this is what Prahlad tells Hiranyakashipu. You think you've conquered everywhere, but what about your own mind? It's your own mind that is the real enemy, because it's out of control. Now, one more point. When Sandanumarka first expressed astonishment at Prahlad's reciting Bhagavad Dharma, and when they accused Prahlad that which enemy has taught you this? What was Prahlad's response? And I think it's a great response for us to have on call, have ready for ourselves. Prahlad said, Tasmai Bhagavate Namaha. I offer my humble obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose illusory energy this whole concoction of friends and enemies happens. I've heard about it from authorities, and now I am seeing it. Tasmai Bhagavate Namaha. I offer my obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose illusory energy is causing all this to happen, all this stuff to happen. We can keep that in mind. We need to take shelter of a higher energy. Mahatmanas tumam partha daivim prakritim ashritaha bhajantyananya manaso gatra bhutadamavya. So I hope that I've somehow motivated you as well as myself to consciously deal with this friends and enemies issue. Yes, it's an essential part of material life, but it is not wanted in spiritual life. Sometimes there are disagreements with devotees about how Krishna should be served, how the philosophy should be understood and applied. But we have to beg Krishna for the supernatural power of not dividing devotees into friends and enemies because of some difference. And I agree with you. It takes great restraint and it takes purification, but this is the way to go if we truly want to be a Vaishnava. All right. There's so much more I could say, but I want to keep this class to about an hour. I could talk about how Krishna brought up little Krishna at the onset of the Govardhan Lila, brought this friends and enemies point up to his father, Nanda Maharaj. What's the secret about this Govardhan Puja? Well, before they got to Govardhan Puja, the Indra Puja. Indra again. Why are you going through all this preparation for the yajna? For Indra? Tell me what's going on here. The father, Nanda Maharaj, didn't want to talk about it at first. He didn't think his boy would understand. He doesn't think his boy is the supreme personality of Godhead. So his father ducked the whole inquiry by little Krishna. But then Krishna told him, look, someone who's saintly doesn't keep secrets. Keeping secrets means you see some persons as close to you and some persons as far to you, some persons as enemies, some persons as friends. Please, Father, come on. You can talk. You're a saintly person. And then Krishna says something even more interesting to Nanda Maharaj. He said, look, all right, the Acharya is explaining it in this way. You may say you're a householder and householders don't have the time or energy to be saintly persons, so they have to make distinctions between friends and enemies. Okay, even if that's true, I'm your son. You can't keep a secret from a family member. So I'll leave you on that point. Oh, but I see there's some questions. All right. Let's see. Should I take any questions through chat,
Yes,
or should I?
Maharaj. Yes,
Okay,
Maharaj,
well,
you can read it from the chat.
Or if someone has questions they want to ask directly, can you unmute them?
Yes, Maharaj. They can raise their hands. I can unmute them. There is an option in participants where you can raise your hand.
Oh, might be too technical for them.
Okay, or you can unmute yourself. I've given that option.
All right. From Gora Bhakti, Devi Dasi. What role does envy play in the conception of an enemy? Consciously and subconsciously, envy plays a major role in enemy designation. Why are you blocking my way? Materially, psychologically. I wish you would get out of my way. And even worse, I wish you would get out of the world. Just like animal slaughter. You know, the Shastra describes how that is envy. I shall live and you creature will die. You live only to satisfy my tongue. And when I want you dead and on my plate, that's the way it's going to be. So yes, envy plays an enormous role. I envy that you have such power and influence to interfere with my life and my program, my service to Krishna. I envy you that you somehow there can have some consequence. You can have some impact. From next one. If one currently has no enemies within devotee community, but when you see some demoniac people doing cruel things, this is a politics question. We'll skip the names here of famous American politicians of whatever stripe. When you see some demoniac people doing cruel things, how does one consider such a person a friend? You have to understand the effects of ignorance, the avidya shakti. Without proper knowledge and a process of purification, there will be cruelty, whether grossly or subtly. If there is no process for cleansing the heart, how can you expect real unity? You can talk unity all you want, bring all the people together, and I admit I like to talk, but I also know that without purification, such attempts at unification and humanism and cooperation on a national and international level, it can't happen because of the pollutions in the heart, which include lust, envy, anger, greed, madness, illusion, those famous 6 enemies. What's your process for dealing with that? Will voting deal with that? Now, I'm not saying don't vote, not getting into that. What I am saying is voting alone will not cleanse the heart. That's all I'm saying. And because we're under the influence of the illusory energy, we then, as an unnatural outcome, or you could say natural outcome of being under the influence of illusory energy, we see others as friends and enemies. I could get into this more about how, because of impersonalism, we don't see others as individual parts of the Supreme Personality Godhead. We're all servants of the same master. Because of impersonalism, we even can't see other human beings. We can't even see other human beings as individuals. That's why if you want to do violence against people, genocide or whatever atrocity, the first thing you want to do is dehumanize them. Give them a number, not a name. Blot them out as human beings. Call them animals. Call them vermin. And that allows you to be cruel. That allows you to hate even more and be more envious. Sociological research has been done showing that the most savage tribes in terms of intertribal violence in the jungles of South America or whatever The most savage tribes are those that paint their faces so that you can't tell who is who. And because they wear masks or they have war paint on, they then feel free to commit atrocities. And of course, as I said, there's the other way. Dehumanize the opposition. Just like in the USA now, I saw one poll that said 20% of the members of each political party think that the world would be a much better place if the other party just disappeared from the face of the earth. In other words, so this ideology and madness causes us to forget we're dealing with persons, and we just get caught up in these materialistic ideologies, and we can't even see I'm a human being dealing with other human beings. What to speak of mercy for the animals? It's all about ideology. So if you want to be a totalitarian terrorist, here's the way to go about it. This has been established by sociological research. Isolate people, keep them apart from one another. That means keep them from dealing with others respectfully and with an open mind, and then give them an ideology that they identify with. And they become so absorbed in the ideology, or whatever political notion, that they can't see other people. This is another effect of being lost in the world of screens, smartphones, laptops, computers, tablets. You're not really dealing with people. You're dealing with just screens. And you then make the mistake of thinking, I'm so personal. I have so many friends. And all you are dealing with is your screens and the ideas that the screens are permeating of whatever political stripe, whatever political flavor. So this can affect devotees. We become so caught up in not simply spiritual conceptions, but material conceptions that we can't see the other person. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Oh, you're one of those, huh? You're one of those who thinks in that way, eh? This is a huge problem. Okay, next question. What would be the best way to handle a situation where a devotee views us as an enemy? It's a tough one. It requires sense control. No one likes that someone else causes you grief. No one else likes that someone impedes you, obstructs you. It's painful to be misunderstood, especially by devotees. We're all devotees. I thought we all understand each other automatically. Well, great restraint is required. I can only say what I do. I try to take more shelter of Krishna, knowing that I can't handle this on my own with my own faculties. I need superior power. Such situations, when a devotee views you as an enemy, lets you know how helpless we are in terms of our needing more help in order to go to a higher platform. The last thing we want to do is retaliate. Oh, then we're completely on the material platform. Devotees do not retaliate. Somehow or other, and it's not easy, somehow or other we think, I am wrong in some kind of way. Somehow or other, I'm influencing the situation so that this person thinks I'm an enemy. It takes work. I admit, but what else are we here for? And if we can get over this friends and enemies labeling, we'll attract the mercy of Krishna. We do want to be, as Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita, dear to all living entities, and all living entities are dear to us. But we've got to work at it. Becoming aware of the problem is great progress on the way to victory over it. We need divine help. So that's my answer to the question. What's the best way to handle a situation where a devotee views us as an enemy? What else? It is very difficult to give up the differentiation of friends and enemies, even within the society of devotees. How shall we deal with devotees with whom we feel somehow disconnected? Is it legitimate to take a distance from devotees whom we feel inimical? I think you mean, because I know English is not your first language, I think you mean, is it legitimate to take a distance from devotees who you feel they are inimical to you? Not that you feel inimical. I hope that's what you mean. But you feel that they think they should be inimical toward you. It's an unfortunate situation. And again, it requires superior spiritual strength to handle this. And sometimes you just have to stay out of the person's hair, avoid a confrontation. Just try to not encounter the person so that you minimize a chance, an opportunity for possible conflict. Sometimes that's not possible. And then you really got to bite your tongue and control your senses, all the stuff we hate to do. You see, we're going to have to go through this challenge and learn how to deal with it sooner or later in our spiritual life. Don't think that, well, if I just flick off this situation, if I just not try to deal with this conflict in a bhakti way, there'll be smooth sailing the rest of my life. No. You'll encounter another such situation. So you might as well get good at it, because we want the sangha of devotees. Without that sangha, our hearing and chanting doesn't become enriched. This is the Sankirtan movement, together. And togetherness sometimes means the old Bengali proverb, you put a bunch of kitchen utensils together on a cart, and as the cart's moving along the dirt road, the utensils bang into each other and make a bit of noise. So we have to learn how to deal with that commotion, that noise, in a bhakti way. It's a lifetime career to learn how to handle this stuff. But you become so much more peaceful and so much more valuable in devotional service if you actively strive to deal with this friends and enemies issue. Now this, I'm going to make one last point. I'm not saying devotees shouldn't have those who are friends in terms of devotional service, hearing and chanting. I'm not saying that at all. We're talking about material distinction of friends and enemies, especially when it results in inimical feelings or negative feelings between devotees. But every devotee needs some associates with whom you can hear and chant and practice the 6 loving exchanges. And we are spirit souls having a human experience. So human beings do get along easier with other human beings. Human beings who are spirit souls practicing bhakti do get along better with other Vaishnavas. So we're not being impersonal and monistic here. It's all one. But we're on guard against material distinctions that are not in accord with the vision of a proper devotee. We want friendships that are increasing our devotional service. Not mundane friendship. Hey, you want to go watch a movie with me? You're my friend. Of course, it depends on what movie you're going to watch. But you get my point. Let's go to a bar together. If you want a grosser example. We want our friendships with devotees to be for spiritual enlivenment, so we can practice the 6 loving exchanges. We reveal our mind, they reveal their mind to us, so that we become better in our efforts for pleasing Krishna. That's the best friend. Sometimes you have to talk about what's going on within you, but the whole point is, how can I please Krishna more and more? That's what friends are for. So naturally, we're going to feel more inclined to some devotees than others. At the same time, however, we shouldn't get into dividing devotees into camps of friendly, enemy, inimical. It takes some maturity, doesn't it? How to reconcile not being friends or enemies with anyone with the comfort that the Vaishnava devotee of Krishna is always our well-wisher. One of the processes of devotional service is sharing with the devotee. Only by surrendering to the feet of the Vaishnava can we make advancement. How can we not see him as our friend? I just answered that. One thing you can keep in mind is that just because you're friends with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 devotees doesn't mean you can't try to be friends with so many devotees. Why stop at 1, 2, 3, or 4? That you have 1 or 2 or 3 friends amongst the Vaishnavas lets you know there's unlimited Vaishnavas out there, and you can try to be their friend. Why stop? Why limit yourself? It's amazing how we have this limited conception of friendship. Why not learn how to make progress in treating all devotees in such a way that they might become your friend? This is what Krishna says in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. One who's dear to all living entities. That's what we should aspire for. I'm never lost to such a devotee, Krishna says. How to deal in situations when there are differences of opinions or moods, especially in the devotee community. Well, that's definitely going to happen. We have so much variety. And in ISKCON, for the most part, the devotees that can be around us are not the kind of persons we would have associated with in material life because ISKCON is so big and variegated. so diverse, so that even, for example, someone can be from India and in a congregation, an ISKCON congregation that's mostly Indian. But guess what? In many cases, the Indian congregation members are coming from different parts of India. And so normally they would not associate with, South Indians with North Indians and Bengalis with Sri Lankans. And I know one devotee couple. They won't mind my saying so. They're at Gita Nagari, the famous combination of Dhruva Maharaj Das and Parijata Devi Dasi. Parijata Devi Dasi's family is from South India. Dhruva Maharaj Das's family was North India. They had to marry in secret because can you believe that? They're both from India, but no, he's from North India and she's from South India. Oh, they had to have a marriage in a garage. Secret event. Because you might think, but they're all Indians. No. And of course, if you're Gujarati, it's not simply being Gujarati that is the criterion. What Gujarati caste are you from? So this is my point. That ISKCON gives you a chance to rub shoulders with persons that normally, if you were in material life, you wouldn't be close to. And even if they're the same material type in terms of ethnicity, in terms of occupation, in terms of proclivities, interests, in so many ways, we're associating with persons who, as if we were in material life, we would not be rubbing shoulders. I'm looking at on Zoom, I see those who have their videos on. Nrikeshri Das, he's from Germany. Denukari is from Ukraine. I first met him in Ukraine. Did he ever think when he was in Ukraine that he would be in the Radha Govinda temple? And there's Surapal and Krishnamayi. I used to hide Surapal from the secret police on a remote farm in Poland in the Soviet days. And he would never think that he was going to wind up in the USA. And then there's Venu Madhurya Das and Leela Madhurya Dasi. They're from Russia, but then they lived in Czech Republic and they spent some time in Ukraine and now they're in the USA. And who could ever predict such things? So the Bhakti community, as Prabhupada has established it, gives us a chance to really diversify and get off the bodily platform and even get off the mental platform, because we have to deal with persons of different mentalities, and that sometimes isn't easy. All for Krishna's service, all this trouble for Krishna's service. It's glorious. This is the Sankirtan movement. We all want to get together and chant Jai Sachinandana, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur predicted. All right. I've talked more than I expected. So I thank you so much for your kind attention. I hope this topic of friends and enemies, a basic material necessity, ? I hope it has been of some value to you. Thank you very much. Glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you. Dandavat Pranam
Hare
Maharaj.
Krishna
Hare
Maharaj.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for the wonderful lecture. So, just a quick
Hare Krishna
announcement.
Maharaj.
This lecture is being live telecast on ISKCON New York TV YouTube channel, so you can see it later. And next week, our guest is His Grace Pran Govinda Das from Alachua. So, thank you, and now you can unmute yourself and wish Maharaj Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj, for your association. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna
Krishna Maharaj.
Maharaj.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Maharaj, Dandavad.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Haripo.
Actually, yeah, right. He's already left.